We are joined next by Representative Rodney Davis, 13th District of Illinois, the southwest part of the state, and he is also the top Republican on the House Administration Committee, which Congressman Davis will have a key role in terms of determining the parameters for coming back for the U.S. House. What have you done so far? What can we expect?
Well, thanks for having me on. First off, we had a very successful vote series to pass the second round of funding for our Paycheck Protection Program. We were able to make sure that the Capitol remained safe. Almost every single office in both the Republican and Democrat caucuses are teleworking. So there's virtually zero staff running around the House office buildings, just the staff that works in the Capitol and those that are on the floor. If you turned on C-SPAN during those debates, you saw people wearing masks, people orderly and in a very orderly fashion coming in and out to vote. Vote series were longer, but they were safer, and each voting machine was cleaned between votes. I think we can safely get back to the Capitol and do it in a way that protects everybody.
Are you a little frustrated that you're not back this week?
Well, it was kind of like ping pong last week. One day we said we were told by the majority we were coming back to Washington. In less than 24 hours, they changed their mind. That's part of the issue that we have. We can come together, and we do, in a very bipartisan way, to talk about how do we use technology, to talk about implementing it into our House operating systems and our official responsibilities. But at the same time, we have to respect the fact that there are no rules in the House rules that would allow for remote voting or the ill-advised proxy voting that the Democrats proposed last week. So if we're serious about governing and we're serious about talking about helping the American people, we've got to get back to Washington.
Tell us why you just used the term ill-advised proxy voting. Tell our viewers and listeners what proxy voting means and why you think it's not a good idea.
Well, keep in mind, just a few short years ago when Republicans took over the House in 1995 after 40 plus years of straight Democrat majorities, we got rid of proxy voting. Proxy voting had been abused by leadership in the committees, and it's something that effectively took away the voice of many individual members. Just bringing proxy voting back, I think, has some circumstances that we're not taking into consideration yet. And frankly, the worst part of it was a process that had zero Republican input. It was a process that was put together by the Democratic majority, told us that this is what was going to happen. It was needed in case of an emergency. And frankly, they pulled the bill about a few hours before I was supposed to go testify in front of the House Rules Committee while I was in D.C. And then we subsequently voted on a piece of legislation that didn't need proxy voting. We had more than was needed for a quorum. Members of Congress we're itching to get back to work. We're itching to get back to Washington, D.C. We want to solve even more problems than what we did a week ago. And we've got to stop with the partisanship coming out of the majority with plans like proxy voting that don't fit within the House rules and frankly can be abused by leadership once this is implemented during a so-called emergency like they were trying to do.
Well, the Senate is returning this week, obviously, for legislative work, but also holding a number of hearings, we understand, in-person hearings. Do you anticipate the same will be true with the House, that actually some committees will physically meet, and others will hold teleconference hearings or Zoom-type hearings?
Well, that's a suggestion that Leader McCarthy gave to Majority Leader Hoyer in our first meeting of our bipartisan task force that was put together after the proxy voting process was pulled by the majority. He suggested coming back in a phased process. Remember, Washington, D.C. as we knew it on March 13th is not the same Washington, D.C. today around Capitol Hill. Restaurants are closed. You can't walk into the Capitol and see a flood of staffers, let alone constituents and people visiting the nation's capital. It's virtually barren. So if we're sending people back to committee hearings on a rotating basis, you can get a lot of stuff done because there's nobody around. You can make sure that you focus on those committee duties. And we've got some pretty important bills that we need to pass in a bipartisan way, be it the National Defense Authorization Act. That funds our military. We've got to come back and do our appropriations bills. We ought to be able to have our appropriations subcommittees meet on a basis that they can come in and really drill down and focus on the work ahead, along with the committee I serve on, transportation and infrastructure. We've got a water resources bill and a highway reauthorization that we could come back to. We could safely socially distance ourselves, maybe utilizing the House floor as our committee room, and we can work out our differences in a bipartisan way and do it safely and make sure that we protect everyone involved.
Well, you kind of alluded to it a moment ago, Congressman. The folks may be aware that actually the Capitol is underground, and the office is a teeming city of people during its busiest times of staff and members and other workers. How will you handle that when the House comes back next week? Will those members, those staffers, continue to work remotely, most of them?
Well, the attending physician of the Capitol, he has recommended that offices still remain in telework mode. I can tell you, we did a lot of preparation on the House Administration Committee. This was a bipartisan success. I'll give Chairperson Lofgren a lot of credit working with me. We made sure that each and every office in the House had access to equipment, and they were ready to telework when the call came out to make that happen. I anticipate teleworking to be a part of the Capitol processes and the Capitol office operations for not just months to come, but for years to come. I think we can safely lay out some protection measures to ensure that staffers aren't huddled into small offices without having the opportunity to telework. Those are the things that Leader McCarthy and also Ranking Member Tom Cole and we laid out in a plan today that was released, that Leader McCarthy released today, that talks about how we safely return to the Capitol, and really, most importantly, what our vision of what Congress looks like after the coronavirus. That's the issue that I think we all need to take a step back and realize what we think we're going to see when we come back, and then how we operate within that viewpoint.
One more quick question, Congressman, close at home. How are things in your district with your constituents and with your family?
Well, thank you. And my wife is a healthcare worker. So she gets up and goes to a facility that treats COVID patients on a daily basis. Her and her fellow nurses are doing the work of heroes during this crisis. My kids are home from college, got back home a few months earlier than I think they anticipated from their grad school year one. And then also my twins are freshmen in college, or were freshmen in college. It's finals week. I never expected them to be home here during finals week. But I want to tell you, my constituents, they have resolved just like these kids do here in my house. You see people making sure the essential services are provided for. Our healthcare workers, our first responders are going to work every day. And that's something that we believe Congress should be able to do much more safely too. And then we ought to be able to get our work done to help those same individuals who are working so hard to fight this disease, to protect people from this disease, to cure people from this disease, and really to help our economy survive during this disease.
Congressman Rodney Davis from Illinois, 13th District there. We appreciate you being here. Look forward to you returning to the nation's capital as well. Thanks for being with us this morning.